I guess I'll start talking now then. Anyway, so I'm here from New York right now. It's funny, I actually have my neighbor who happens to be an SRE, literally lives in the apartment above us, in my 7 televisions here in my apartment now, right? And my dog. And so he's on the AirPods. And so just so that we can get in a full meetup setting here, do you guys see my presentation as well now? That's what's running?
I do not see your presentation yet.
All right, so I have to share the screen. Hold on. Yeah, I can open share tray. There you go. Do you have it?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right. And so now, look, and I don't know what I look like in this frame, but I think I'm good. And so I have this little fancy pointer. Cool. All right. So HLS and DASH multi-codec encoding and packaging. Funny, Will, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. With now I'm going to hopefully get a little bit more nitty gritty and show you how I currently have kind of done R&D here at Fubo with our VODs and ultimately deliver both HEVC and AVC. So just so we can get approximation and understanding of what VOD looks like at fuboTV. Yeah, we literally do have 40,000 VODs in license window today. With our Disney launch and FXM and everybody like that coming back, that's probably a little bit larger now. I'd say it's about the same incoming, approximately 1,000 hour long source files. Source files are average, approximately 25 gigabytes each. And so international has its own series of issues, but we cut those live from VOD, right, as well. Key takeaways. So basically the goal here is going to be to hopefully let you know how easy it actually is in theory to deliver multiple codecs using your edge. And then ultimately also kind of understand where an organization like Fubo, who's an OTT organization, who very much so counts and cares about every single subscriber, regardless of device, and where the world, like all the different I guess you say edge cases we're going to have to take care of, and then what you hit on, Will, as well, when it comes to DRM, right, and where the landscape is in current state. So quickly, my little fancy Lenovo pointer here, ready? So basically, Fox is going to go ahead, is going to drop it, well, Disney now, right? Going to drop in, going to deliver us a package via Aspera. Aspera is then we host our own Asperas and EC2s that are then going to go into an S3 bucket. We then have an orchestration service that basically is looking at the S3 bucket as files start showing up. Basically, once I know I have everything that I need, whether it be metadata and the video file itself, I'm now going to go ahead and have a second system here. Currently, in the state of things, we use Dolby and Hybrid for transcoding. And then actually now, as of the last 2 to 3 months here, I'm actually doing the homegrown packager. And so eventually, no, my hand needs to go that way. There we go. And then eventually we get to our S3. And then once we're in our S3, we have a CDN over the top. And I just happen to be using Lambda Edge. You can use this in Fastlane, Varnish, or any of that stuff. There we go. Or any of that beautiful thing, but some type of logic in your edge that's going to go ahead and look at your origin. Just so everybody can understand the landscape here, we use AV Player for iOS and tvOS. We use Exo Player for Fire TV and Android. We have Roku Native Player for Roku. BitMove is the Web HTML5. Smart TV, we're using the actual Tizen Player. Chromecast, we're using Shaka Player. Hisense is a device partner that we're launching with. We're using the Hisense Player. And Xbox, we're using their native player. You can take a guess here. And so pretty much everybody's getting Dash, and I actually prefer to keep devices on Dash, but obviously, Apple wants to be who they are, and we have to use HLS there, even though I also kind of prefer HLS over Dash. Dash is its own worst enemy, in my opinion, sometimes. Anyway, all right, an ideal world. So we're going to transcode one set of fragmented MP4s to both H.264 and H.265 outputs. We're going to package both HLS and Dash from the set of transcoded H.264 and 265 outputs. Players, in reality, should be able to choose what they want, right? Multi-package solution. transcode one set of fragmented T4s, H.264, H.265, package HLS with both H.264 and H.265 because Apple owns, and the only thing I'm delivering with HLS in this current state, and Apple happens to own all the hardware and also owns the spec HLS. They very much so have been really good about supporting both codecs and backwards compatibility there. Dash, on the other hand, you're going to see kind of turns into a little bit more of a crapshoot, I guess we'll call it. So key thing to note here is that we're ultimately going to have a master.mpd with only we're going to have a master.mpd with only what H.264s, right? And then we're going to have a master.HEVC with H.265s, right? Player multi-codec playlist playback support. Can you say that 5 times fast? So basically, as I said, all Apple devices are going to be good to go here. I've had no issues with Apple players eventually, as long as I follow spec and the HLS is in good shape. The Apple player will know when to switch up to different variants. Now, ExoPlayer was good to go. Roku had issues. I mean, I've been doing this for now. It's funny. This has been over a year that I've worked on this effort. And so basically, as of 9.3, this should be fixed. I still haven't double checked it, but I'm going to trust Roku on this one and actually say that they're now able to switch between the two. But they were not able to, and so this is what ultimately ended up forcing me to having to come up with a solution where I can basically pick and choose codecs to deliver in my Dash. Now, just so we understand the world of DRM, I've done this talk now 3 times. This is the 3rd time. The 2nd time I actually built upon it a little bit more and actually wanted to show where the world of DRM now starts to become an issue, just plays in here. And so we're going to transcode one set of fragmented MP4s to both H.265, H.264, H.265. We're going to package and encrypt both HLS and Dash from the set of H.264 and H.265 outputs. Encryption is done one time for both Dash players and HLS players, method of encryption. All devices can decrypt all media formats. So this was what Will was hitting on his slides before, which is this concept. In theory, this would be CBCS. But CMAF, Common Media Almost format. I'm proud of myself on that one. CMAF has different methods of encryption. We have CENC and CBCS. Apple players require CBCS with HEVC. Most other players can also decrypt CENC and HEVC, right? So, as you can see now, we now basically have, no matter what, since we're delivering to Apple and HEVC, we have to do CBCS. Not every single player in the device landscape has the ability to decrypt CBCS. And so this is where it gets an organization like Fubo, who basically has, I want to say in the 2 to 4% range of customers, paying subscribers, probably on these older Samsungs or older Roku devices or older Chromecasts. We're kind of out of luck in a certain way until basically, in my opinion, one of the larger organizations kind of forces everybody's hands. Quick summary, just so we can go over real quick here. 2 sets of media for HLS and Dash if you need to support CENC. Potentially, particular Dash players might not be able to switch between 2 video codecs. And so those are as I've gone down this R&D or R&I, basically delivering 2 codecs in production, this is what I've noticed and end up having when you're an OTT provider like fuboTV. Basically, I'm really looking forward, Will, to seeing your colleagues' work. I'm assuming it's something like this and potentially put together much better than this image that I found off of this link and article. But this was as of, I believe, a year ago. And so now also with Play Ready, we're even getting closer, right? But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the fact of will someone like, will an OTT organization like us basically ever make the decision to force a customer to basically drop a paying subscriber? I'll tell you right now, no, at least as of current. So how do I go ahead and deliver these two different sets of codecs. So edge logic, one header to rule them all. Players are going to add header with another header with supported decoding capabilities, right? The lack of the above header is treated as part of the logic. The need for backwards compatibility with previous single assets that are in prod. And this also is going to go ahead and allow us to roll out over time and also allow new encodes that might have HEVC, kind of also what you were talking about, Will, which is maybe we want to include HEVC on certain sets of assets or not. And so we use the origin as the source of truth as to whether or not this is an HEVC and or an AVC asset, right? And so this is just an example of something bright script for anybody who loves, who wants to kind of see a fan. I guess it kind of looks like JavaScript in a way. I don't know. Anyway, this is bright script. This is Roku's way of determining. This is how, from the player's perspective, all players have some type of ability to do something similar to this. And so this is how they're going to go ahead and populate that, the information that then goes on the header request that's going into the origin, right? So let me see if I can do this good here. Here's how we're going to do this, right? And so get to the master. Basically, at this moment in time, you're then going to check if the player exists. If this exists and the player can decode HEVC, you're going to get this one back, right? Basically, the header is going over here, and then we're going to choose between, we're going to choose either that, or if not, we're going to just give you back regular master.mpd. We're choosing Explorer. And here is the wonderful Lambda edge logic. Look how simple this is in a way. Basically, what we're going to do, and so something to note here, this is version 1.2, and so now I've actually put a gist. If anybody wants to go and grab this, I will distribute all the slides after this, or if you can, David, you can actually send out the links there, or somebody can copy it and put it in there. But this is just basically that code that's in here. And so something to note here is you're actually using another CDN cache, right, to check if that file actually exists, right? And so that should be fairly, that basically stays in an edge itself, and is actually not going to take very long for us to go ahead and tell if we have this master, right? Because it's just present or not, and we would purge it if we ultimately ever made some changes. Now, you can go ahead and hit my CDN, I don't really care. But in my little GIFs, I call it your S3 origin here. And so pretty simple, right? If we basically have the supported codec, if we support HEVC, and we get a 200 when we're looking for master.HEVC, in the same, all we're doing is we're doing a replace, a simple replace there. Then we can go ahead and send you the data to master.HEVC, right? Which exists. If not, you're going back to master.mpd, and we're not going to intercept and redirect you. Now, this was another thing for 1.2 here that I've added. Packaging both HLS and DASH with shaka and bento. So this is the work that I've actually been doing as of the last 3 to 4 months, I would say, give or take. 8 out of 10 playback bugs in production are relevant to DRM and packaging of HLS and DASH. It's not the fact that the player can't play ABC or things like, or B-frames. Actually, that's not true. Some older Chromecasts had issues with B-frames, but at the end of the day, it's usually the interpretation of this packaging, and usually potentially also something to do with DRM, right? And what that player, what that particular player might have an issue with, whether it's the usually only dash or some type of interpretation of the dash spec to its, well, each player has its own somewhat shaky interpretation of the dash spec. And so that was one of my bigger complaints with Dash is having a real source of truth. I would say I usually go to ExoPlayer as that. I also really love Dash IF's conformance tool nowadays to really ensure that Dash is in spec. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm now sharing with anybody who is interested. This is the logic in some Python code that I have, right, that actually will go ahead and for Shaka Packager, you're going to go ahead and create dash, right, with your key and your key IDs. And so any engineer here who is looking for an implementation or some type of way to potentially get them to do packaging on their own or take more control over their packaging, the goal would be basically this is a couple snippets of the code, right? And then we're going to also package HLS, right, which is also going to be that CBCS. And that's going to be done with Bento 4. And you could basically modify this and do what you want. But long story short, this code runs in a container, and its input is pretty much the input directory of basically the way I have it running is an S3 directory full of, basically the VTT file, the audio file, and the actual video file, video bit rates that need to be packaged and put together. And so this is going to go ahead and determine what's in that directory and then package it all nice for you in Dash and HLS with CBCS and CENC. And hopefully that should be a good starting point for anybody who's looking to do something similar. All right. All open source, production mishaps. Basically, something to note when I went ahead and started delivering, fragmented MP4s, which is CMAF, right? Instead of MPEG-2, we had a lot of issues with closed captions and subtitles. Basically, I'm going to go ahead and suggest a workflow of always including some type of sidecar with a .vtt, so that pretty much any player is always going to be able to interpret a .vtt file. That's what I've had to do and normalize across because embeds are not guarantees when it comes to fragmented MP4s and the actual player finding that. And so, in conclusion here, investing in your VOD multi-codec pipeline. This is my future of why I believe, you should, in theory, start exploring the concept of delivering numerous codecs, right? VOD to live. We're going to shut down live encoders. We're going to have a point to VOD for repetitive content. We're going to put the second one here is something that I've found fairly interesting. Honestly, a lot of HDR is a hype to me, and I believe if I actually took 100 random people off a street and showed you a 4K piece of content and then 4K HDR piece of content on two perfectly calibrated screens, I would get a split 50-50 of random consumers, not even like saying which ones they like more. But I will say that when you actually deliver SDR or BT709 in a BT2020 container or PQ or HLG, you'll actually start seeing your SDR content. It actually looks a lot better because the screen is the actual codec is, I don't know the actual underlying technicals in certain ways, but the reality is I've done some messing around with this, and you're actually going to see an overall perceived quality, in my opinion, higher than that of increasing your codec and your bit rate. And so obviously it's not limited to HEVC. That just happened to be the one thing that I went ahead and used for this, but all this logic is easily replicated and scaled to other fancy 3-letter acronyms, since HEVC is the only one with 4 letters. And so I work for tshirts. I run awesome.video. It's a GitHub repo. Please, people contribute. I have like 200 links of more things that I'm trying to figure out how to get into the right categories, but I'm working on contributing also another series of stuff, mainly around DRM, mainly around packaging, as I wrote my own packager. And I'm fairly active. I go through spurts, I would say, in the video dev Slack. And so that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd mention awesome video. Do you want to bring the site up so that people can take a quick look?
Sure.
And I'll paste it in. And I also pasted in the chat the GitHub repo that you referenced, as well as your deck.
Yeah, and I'll put up. I will make sure I send the gist over later. But yeah, and so it's just a simple. As I noted, here's a funny thing, right? So I use raindrop.io, And so I have a whole nother collection. These are all links that are currently not in there that I've basically put into categories, and I'm having an issue in my actual code. Maybe I'll work on that after this since I'm feeling motivated now. But basically, it's the repo. All you would have to do is just go ahead and edit contents.json and add in your links, right? And so you can add categories. I don't care. I'm totally open to all of this. There's been a decent amount of contributions, and I appreciate anybody who has. But as of current, I would say I'm still the larger contributor. And so those 200 extra ones are going to basically fill in the gap of all the stuff around here, since I have very little here, and a lot more to do with I'm also writing my own transcoder. I also have been working in Kubernetes, and so I have a lot of things relative to video in the K8s world that I'm going to place into here. And so, yeah,
cool.
I hope people can find that useful.
That sounds great. Hey, so Nick, we've got Andy, I'll come to you in a second, but we've got one person, Rick, who asked a question in the chat, which I'm
can't
not sure
see the chat. Yeah.
So I'll read it out to you. He asks, what transcode did you use in your spot EC2? Is it FFmpeg?
Yes. And so we're currently using Dolby Hybrid, and I'm currently they're underlying using FFmpeg, but I'm also writing my own replacement with FFmpeg as well, right? And so all FFmpeg workers, you'll see a lot of Python libraries of FFmpeg and transcoding things to be eventually added into the awesome video.
Cool. And then Andy Rosen, looks like you have a question. Your hand is raised.
You said you love the HDR-friendly BT 2020 wrappers. When the real cinematographers, the ones with their nose in the air, the ones who think video is degenerate art.
Creative intent is what I've been told as creative intent, right?
Well, they made it very clear they don't care about 4K. Certainly the studios don't in their hearts. And they don't really care about HDR because you can't see that in a movie theater. Not really, not unless all the audience members are wearing black burqas. But what you can see is wide color gamut. And for better or worse, they're convinced they've proven that. And these are nice people, and their proofs are very compelling. So are you willing to meet HDR halfway and at least embrace the idea that something that's mastered for a, blue so intense it can cause suntans really should be presented in that color space,
So I guess two things here. For instance, I have Smithsonian content, right? A lot of great nature content. I think it matters what content you're like, what you would apply it to. For instance, the tests that I've done it with are mainly around with Dolby folks and mainly around, for instance, some Meekum car auctions and like watching live. Basically, the red looks more red, right? And so I think content is going to be key here to choose to do this with. You wouldn't be able to do it with everything, obviously, or you would need content owners' approval, right, in order to start changing their colors up in certain ways.
Next question is from Will.
Yeah. Am I muted? I'm not muted. Hey, Nick, that was awesome. That's exactly so much of the stuff I talk about and was working with every day.
I'm glad you went first. I'm glad you went first.
If the player is smart enough, just add a custom header saying which codecs it supports. Then why not have a single manifest for HLS and Dash that has all the codecs, send it to all players, and then have the player filter out at the player the ones it knows it can't support, and then play the other ones?
So the players aren't necessarily the ones that are smart enough here, right? It's the request. Basically, it's the request before, like the first HTTP request of before you, the players usually from the code perspective, and I started my career in the like AV player code, you're just passing in a master dot something, right? And so the reality here is all it's looking for is the interpretation. Like it's smart enough to play HLS or it's smart enough to play Dash. You need to get it the right HLS and the right Dash, right? And so I guess the way to think about it is this is the request. At least the way I did it. Sorry, I think I'm having double feedback here from my phone, maybe. unmute. Never mind. The way I was doing it, you're actually going to see master.mpd is going to come back. If, say, for instance, it has multi-codecs in it, it's still going to just look like master.mpd to the player, right? We're keeping the player stupid simple, and we're only passing one URL to it and just handling the data that comes back in that URL from that edge logic, right? We can't necessarily, the way what you're describing all just happens on the edge, right? Or all just happens in some type of proxy or something like that, lane between the player. All these players are dumb. They're not smart, right? They want spec HLS or spec dash, and they want to be given it. And here's the issue. Some of them don't necessarily know what to do with different forms of the spec, whether it's the newer versions of the spec, right? And so you need to, like, a really interesting open source project in the back of my mind would be to have us all put together all these edge cases that we figured out. For instance, Samsung Smart TVs 2017 do not, basically, if you have EME as your encryption tag if you basically use common encryption in 2017, even though you have Widevine and PlayReady or whatever, right? Common encryption, if it happens to be prior to PlayReady and Widevine in the manifest logic, it's going to break on 2017 Samsungs because it doesn't know how to. It basically looks for that UDID and says, I have no idea what this is, right? There's all these weird edge cases that keep happening. And so, reality, all I had to do was just remove or either reverse the order or remove common encryption from my code, right? Or at least on those dash things, because everyone's using pretty much Widevine and PlayReady in the first place.
Okay, it makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we have another question from Hagen. Hagen last. Do you want to
Oh,
unmute yourself?
my favorite individual.
Not really. Thank you, Nick. Not really questions, just two comments. One on Will's question. The challenge that we've also seen is if you send a manifest with different flavors of your content, and you would prefer one flavor to be played if 2 or 3 are supported, it's sometimes hard to generate the manifest that all devices will pick the flavor that you actually want. They might pick a flavor that can be played back, but not necessarily the one that you want to play back. So let's say the highest quality, or in our case, of course, a Dolby format. There's mechanisms, of course, but not all are well supported on all devices. And that's what it comes down to, is really what's supported on the different devices.
I think instead of thinking of a player as smart, the player's dumb here, and it's always going to be. And the reality is, with the whole concept of bit rates and everything like that, actually, you can even use the same exact edge logic to say, hey, if I know this player and this person, let's only include the upper bit rates or the lower bit rate, right? You know what I mean? Back to what you were talking about in your talk, which is going to be what's best for that user over time, right?
And then my second comment on the first question was around the putting SDR in an HDR container. What we've seen and what we actually work on at Dolby is to make sure that content gets rendered the way it's meant to be. And with SDR, as you transmitted today, if you look at 3 different SDR devices next to each other, you will get 3 different pictures. If you put it in a container where you are more in control over how it's being rendered on the actual device, then it might look better or more consistent across all those different devices. And that's what we're doing. We're typically recommending our partners to use industry recommendations like for Movie Labs on how they convert the SDR into HDR.
Is it just me, or has his audio gone funny?
Alden's lost the plot.
Let me see if I can mute him.
So I don't know if this is possible here. This was just. Is this me? Who's is it me?
No,
who's doing that?
No, I don't think so. Looks like he's muted himself. Go. What? Keep
I'm kind of enjoying it, but
I gotta bring an audio stack bug to the Teams team.
It's a feature of Teams to arbitrarily repeat a certain sound.
Your meetings aren't fun, then they're not worth having.
Creates emphasis. This is the point.
Hey, Nick, what were you trying to show us?
Do you guys still have my screen by any means?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah.
So Hagen, that's what you were talking about, right? This was something that Neil and I had worked.
Who else Hagen and Nick now?
That's fantastic.
Can you like edit that sound and put it on video dev as an MP3 or something? That would be awesome. Like, there's so many places I can use that.
You are
Hey, you can
recording
probably
it.
kick
We
it
need
out.
we need memes with audio, Will.
Yeah,
It'll be good. Jeremy, you had a question. Do you want to go
Yeah,
ahead?
I guess
ask
Nick
it.
and I have a long history of probably the same problem, and that's that the TVs lie and that they don't work very well. And whilst when you've got web, if you've got a problem, you can typically solve it and deploy very quickly. iOS and Android, you go through the App Store review process and it takes a little bit longer. But if you've got a problem in some of these platforms like Samsung, Xbox, PlayStation, the actual rollout of the fix can take a long time because you've got to get approval and it's got to get
Roku's always fun
in
with that.
Korea, you've got to sign off, and then you don't whitelist them, and then you've got to get them whitelisted, and then they try and use from Poland, and you got so. Like, this is why I love this idea as well, is because it's not that you can't solve the problem in the player. It's just that if they were to roll out a new Samsung operating system tomorrow and it breaks something in your player, it might take you a little while to get that resolved.
So I will note here, right, that every now and then I didn't have it in this one, but basically we had some issues with, for instance, HEVC and ads and older versions of ExoPlayer or weirdness on certain assets, right?
ExoPlayer is a classic example. Like
but all I had to do
update it
was turn
and
off.
it stops working.
Yeah, and so, but like for instance, we were able to turn off HEVC for ExoPlayers by simply targeting this, right? And in production, and then slowly rolled it back out. And I have analytics all around what manifests people are getting, and so it gives complete dynamic control on the edge side of things, right? Now, I will say this: you probably want to feature flag a lot of different things. I tend to test in production because it's not mission critical when it comes to our live streams. But the reality is, eventually, all the work that's done on our VODs hopefully will then translate into our linear streams one day, or vice. Maybe we'll see if Attempt can ever catch up with me, but it doesn't seem like they can.
Exactly. If you've got a very good SSAI provider, all your manifests are dynamic anyway, so you can do all this fun stuff very quickly. So make sure when you're writing your requirements for SSAI that you're thinking about this stuff.
That is also a big fun one as well.
I think Will had a slide around machine learning driven selection of protocol. I wonder if rather than case statements for all the different players and versions that are lying to you, I wonder if there's a feedback loop that could be kind of thought through here to say, hey, is video playing despite what codec this player claimed to support, and then can I build some machine learning algorithms to kind of dynamically adjust what I plug into the manifest? So
I think this all goes back to that someone like us at Fubo, because we can give that feedback loop. And for instance, right, it's simple as the fact for me to be like, all right, what's my most popular network? And I'm going to go ahead and include HEVC there, because I actually can look at the BigQuery table and figure, like, I have all the stuff within my grasp as I'm encoding in my pipeline. But I think the reality is for vendors like yourselves, or what Will was noting too, that feedback loop is, if not the most important piece of this whole thing, and actually making sure that it gets used appropriately at the right times. And then eventually it'll be, oh, I know that the person has an old Roku. Guess what? You're not even going to get HEVC. I'm not even going to try to give you this because I know all these weird quirks, right? That feedback loop can eventually kind of, take into account the fact that we know we've identified weird QoE issues with codecs as we roll things ones out over time too as well, right?
Cool. Thanks, Nick. Hey, Will, are you still there? Because there's one question that came up in the chat that was for you.
I am still here, yes.
So the question from Rick, I don't think his audio is working, is why can't we use a different congestion control algorithm in Quick? Why must we choose between HTTP2 and Quick, e.g. BBR and Quick?
I'm not the Quick expert. I don't want to give an argument. I believe you can actually use custom congestion control algorithms with Quick. It's just that is not done by default in the implementation. But I know our team have been working on custom congestion over Quick, so that will come out. But that's probably not a good answer, not sufficiently detailed answer. So we're not really choosing between Quick and a congestion. The congestion algorithm is still going to require a base protocol. So it's H1 plus what's my algorithm, H2 plus it, H3 plus it.
Cool. Thanks for that. Well, I
shouldn't have put them all in the same table because they are not substitutes for one another, and it's good to point that out.
Cool. Awesome. And it looks like, Nick, you shared your slides as well. So you literally, I have no work to do. This is fantastic. I love it. I'll post the recording to our channel a bit later on.
Thank you, guys. And so I have to go walk Ruby, who is named after the programming language, by the way. She's going to get a younger brother named Swift one day, maybe. But, yeah, it's been a pleasure. And then there's my neighbor, New York video out, guys. Thank you for having me, and I hope everybody enjoyed the presentations. And Will, thank you for going first because it made me feel like I could speak to your content.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Hagen. I always love hearing your voice. I miss you, buddy.
All right, everyone. Stay safe and he's back again.
Oh, boy. All right, later, guys. Bye.
And on that note, good night, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye.